We're here today to talk about Hillendale Gateway. Uh, I've altered Sean's title a little bit to be a passive building with ZNE, uh, mixed income development in Silver Spring, Maryland. My name is Shane Pollin. I'm principal of PS Ventures. That stands for Passionate and Sustainable Ventures. I'm a boutique real estate developer in suburban Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. And I have, for over 20 years, been specializing in building better buildings, better than code minimum buildings. Hillendale Gateway is actually a partnership. It's a public-private partnership. It's a partnership between PS Ventures and the business that I worked 17 years with, some family at the Duffy Companies, and the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County. And we make good partners because we both come at this with a long-term hold perspective. We don't cut corners. We're the ones who need to maintain the buildings over time. And we have found that building better, more durable, more resilient buildings is the way to go. And we're proud to be doing that in partnership with HOC. So here is Hillendale Gateway. It is a 463 home project in two buildings, two 12-story buildings. The first building is, well, we'll get to the buildings, but they're both mixed income and they are mixed use. There's residential on the first floor of one of the buildings. We've got a shared EV parking garage, and the first phase is programming 70 level 2 EV connectors. We've got public amenities. We're building a transit station adjacent to this development, and we're really targeting some pretty ambitious goals here.
I think
The
you meant
two
to
build,
say, by the way,
yeah.
you said that there's residential on the first floor. You meant to say
Oh,
commercial on
sorry,
the first floor.
commercial on the
Yes,
first floor. Yeah,
exactly.
there's a restaurant on the first floor. Thank you, Sean.
Nice. An all-electric restaurant.
And
Love it.
all electric. Yeah, we're working on actually the programming for that, which is another story. Uh, okay, so the first building is one of the buildings is called the Radia and the Lumina, right? The Radia, the Lumina is what we formerly called the non-age restricted building. It's 308 homes. And it's got, again, some pretty ambitious sustainability targets. We're targeting LEED for Homes Platinum, Energy Star Multifamily, uh, enterprise green communities, the WELL standard, and really we think most impressively and difficult is the FIAS standard, the Passive House Institute US. And just tagging on, I just added here, the Lumina will feature individual meters. Right, Sean. So we can get to. We're also in the Radia. That building, we're also including all of the utilities. So same idea. And I would say, Sean, it will work out, right? Because it's the way to maximize the rent that you can receive, because there's no discounting that has to happen in the affordable housing rent to accommodate the tenants need to pay utilities. So we can get more rent by covering the utilities. And it will remain to be seen whether our modeled rents come out as modeled. Of course, when we cover all utilities, we know we reduce the incentive to conserve some. But as you've helped us understand, that might not really be impactful to water usage. And for electric usage, there's some things we can do. So again, we've got two buildings, 155 homes, 308 homes, really trying to achieve some extraordinary goals. And again, I mentioned what the most difficult, I think, goal that we're trying to achieve is a passive house certification, or as FIAS is wanting to rebrand, passive building certification. For those of you who don't know it, passive house or passive or FIAS, these are above code minimum standards, right? Every building needs to be built to code. It's not the most durable, most resilient, most energy efficient, or best building. It's just code minimum. There are better than code minimums, and we are trying to target what is generally regarded as the world's most rigorous above code minimum building standard. I'll briefly get into what it is, but it's don't worry, Sean, won't spend much time here. Continuous insulation. We really build airtight buildings. There are no thermal bridges through the walls. High performance windows and doors, We have balanced ventilation with heat recovery, and then we use really efficient appliances. And you combine all of these things, which are not rocket science, but they are building science, and we achieve really an extraordinary result. Now, with the introductions out of the way, Sean asked me to make this a little bit more of a technical discussion for how to do it. I think Jamie, I really appreciated his opening session this morning, and he talked about how you message these buildings. I think happy to hear we are right in line with what was being recommended about focusing on durability, resiliency, how it meets the needs of the folks who live here. But for this presentation, Sean has asked me in somehow 30 minutes to go through what I could talk for hours about on this development. And so, well, without further ado, sorry for those who don't want to get into how we actually accomplish this in a 12-story format, but here we go. So structure and form, we are utilizing a concrete frame for Hillendale. We're using a simple rectilinear shape. It's not that you can't achieve high performance with more complex shapes, but it's going to be a lot easier if you keep a simple shape. A simple shape is easier to construct. If it's easier to construct, it's easier to construct right. There's less detailing and less surface area. It's minimized the drainage plane changes. So we might achieve, as you'll see, some articulation in the face of the building, but it's not done at the drainage plane. So we've minimized structural projections. And again, we started with a proprietary system called Prescient out of Colorado. That company did not ultimately survive the COVID era. We've been working on Hillendale for over a decade. And so we evolved from mid-grade steel when our proprietary frame company looked to be on the balance of insolvency, which they did ultimately go under, and we switched to concrete. But we are targeting a 30% reduction in embodied carbon in association with the concrete relative to conventional concrete mixes. For our building envelope, we'll start with the roof, right? We're insulating basically continuously on the outside of our building. That is where insulation should go, and so that is where we are putting it. I say it should go there because that's where it is most effective, and that's where we don't have bridges running through the sides of our building. So we have a concrete slab as well, and we have tapered polyisosanurate insulation running up to 24 inches thick on our roof, given that we try to achieve pitch to drain and reach our insulation targets. So pretty thick roof there you see at the bottom left, some buckets on the deck, and you can see that's probably over a foot thick there. And then we insulated up our parapet walls, and we utilized, which you'll see in a little bit, thermally broken roof davit anchors. For the walls, it's a pretty traditional wall. It's a metal stud with gypsum sheathing. I will say we recommend, even though we have a concrete frame, you could thin the walls. We actually thinned the walls in areas, uh, but we found conflicts when we thinned the walls. Uh, we had difficulties making transitions. We had difficulties at window mullions. Uh, we had difficulties where we had left some of the space in the cavity for uh, electric, for example, that would be not obstructing the insulation in the walls. We still put insulation in the walls, but it's really mainly for acoustic purposes. So we use mineral wool, is what you see there in the bottom picture. That's where it's a little bit of a thicker wall, so there's some cavity. So even the electrical wires are not disrupting the exterior insulation that's in the walls for acoustics. And there you see, we chose EFIS because it's readily available. The trades know it. They don't normally install it at the thickness that we're installing it, which is at 4 or 6 inches thick. Again, some of that to achieve articulation, but it's a known system with a single source warranty. And we kept a continuous drainage plane by utilizing a system of exterior insulation finishing systems. So we tried to keep it simple. We kept a single plane, a drainage plane, which is the yellow fluid applied surface that you see against the building. But we achieve articulation, for example, at the windows. You can see there's a slight inset there. It looks like wood. All that is different surfaces and coatings of the exterior insulation finishing system. We use line work, we use color to achieve interest in what is a readily available and affordable exterior uh, uh, cladding. So instead of something like masonry, which would be beautiful, it's a lot more affordable, and we choose to save money on the majority of the field and to put that money into the windows, for example, and into our air sealing.
May I ask if you could go back and talk about how you added those balconies and broke the thermal bridging?
We'll get there.
Oh, pardon me. Go for
Yep,
it.
no worries, no worries. So at the windows that are in the walls, we've wrapped the window openings with thermal insulation so that we there would normally be in a traditional window, there is a thermal bridge at the corner of the window, a space where you can envision, particularly if you use a metal stud and you put the window in, there's a little area there where there's not much insulation. That means that our cold studs would get would be at risk of condensation. So everything is hygrothermically modeled for this building, and so we're reducing condensation risk while trying to meet passive house standards. And our chosen solution here was to wrap the window openings. We bring that insulation all the way down under the buildings, right? So we insulate under the slab, we insulate up the stem wall. We don't have to go all the way around the footing. We modeled that to determine that we didn't need to do that, which would have added increased complication. And then, as Sean mentioned, that balcony, right, in traditional construction is a giant thermal bridge through your wall. In other words, if the same piece of concrete that you stand on inside is what is on the balcony, and it's very cold outside, then your feet will be cold because it is just conducting heat right through that wall. To break that thermal bridge, we are using a product out of Europe called Choke. You can see it installed in the left. You see sort of a picture of it and some illustrations. And essentially, this is um, a device that's used to lengthen the thermal path from the balcony in. So there is metal in it, but it takes a circuitous route. It goes through a structural foam as it comes through the wall, and you end up breaking what is otherwise a pretty significant thermal bridge that would be occurring. We do that there, and we also have to pay attention to other elements. For example, the roof davits. Here you see a thermally broken roof davit, because otherwise, if you just uh, bolted a piece of metal to your frame and then let it project through your insulation, you've defeated the purpose of the insulation. So we had to utilize these thermally broken roof davits. You can see we model all this. It's a little snapshot of a hygrothermal model where we're testing each of these elements in the computer to make sure that we're not creating condensation risk. And even on penetrations that you see in the bottom left, where we use a piece of structural foam blocking, for example, behind a piece of wood that we can screw in, but we're trying not to bring metal through our insulation wherever we can. Let's get into the mechanical system, starting with ventilation. You can generally, there are different approaches. There are full building systems, like whole building systems on one end of the spectrum, and there are individual systems at the other end of the spectrum. We are somewhere in the middle for our ventilation. We're using a semi-decentralized or semi-centralized, also known as neighborhood approach. Each neighborhood serves about 30 homes on not more than 2 floors. Not more than 2 floors so that we don't need to put the complication of fire dampers and fire shafts. We decrease the duct sizes as they come down the hallways. It's easier to balance the air in these tall buildings. When you have a 12-story building, the air actually has weight to it. And so you could have difficulty balancing when you're trying to balance a whole building system that's going from the ground or roof to other parts of the building. And we have common access for maintenance by putting semi-decentralized systems that we can access versus, for example, an individual ERV within a home. So we've freed up some spaces within the homes. We're able to run these at our higher voltage. So if we have thinner wire, and then we, importantly, because as we mentioned with Passive House, we are building very tight buildings, but there's an expression, build tight. ventilate right. We want to maintain our ventilation for as much time as we can, including in those unfortunate times when power might go out. And so, as part of the resiliency of these buildings, when the power goes out, the ventilation stays on. So here you can see a trunk and branch system that runs down the hall. And I think this is a good place to just point out that one of the things that really sets Hillendale apart and this type of building apart is the extraordinary amount of thought and pre-design that goes into almost every aspect of the building. Here you can see a drawing at the bottom left that we developed in advance for how we were going to fit all of these systems in our hallway. I will acknowledge that while we are designing in advance, we're still dealing with construction and the realities of construction. So it didn't look like the picture on the right until about the sixth floor. Uh, but it was not for lack of trying and for design. We
Hold on
also,
for a second.
yeah,
What are you saying until the sixth floor?
I'm saying when we first walked in the building, we looked up and those lines were running right down the middle of the hall, tight to each other, not as you see the drawing, high
Oh,
and tight to the corners of the hallways. And
right.
so there are disadvantages to the it will work, but for example, long-term access to all of the utilities in the middle, etc. In fact, it's funny because when it finally got built this way, the general contractor who was working with us to try to get the subs and everyone on board literally took a picture that looks just like this picture into one of their newsletters because they thought of how great it looked when it was done right. And we're saying, yes, this is what we intended from the beginning. We have tried to help this PSV. I've got an outstanding team that I work with, including a gentleman, Will Combs, who's actually here with me. And so we try to help visualize this for the subcontractors and for everybody. So we modeled what this is looking like. And here you can see the intakes, the exhausts, and the service of two floors. Uh, for the primary heating and cooling, traditional buildings would have large, complex central systems. We are allergic to large, complex systems. We wanted to use one-to-one, but there's a maximum duct or a line, a condensate, or excuse me, a copper line set length for smaller systems, such that we could not successfully get to the roof or to the ground in a 12-story building with a maximum run of 60 or 70 feet. And so we wanted to use the individuals because they're so ubiquitous. You see them on the end cap of Home Depot. The prices are falling. They're easily serviced, and plenty of people can service them. There's a lower refrigerant volume, right? We don't have to worry about a large central system evacuating into one person's home. That would not be great. They're easily upgradable, so we don't have a big system lock-in, right? We didn't buy an expensive system. When one little piece breaks, you got to stick with that expensive system because you're not replacing the whole thing. We don't have that issue, and they're simple to control. And so we really wanted to use these types of systems, but we had a large, taller building. We viewed that as a design problem. And so we developed a design solution. The design solution was to integrate a shroud, as we called it, on the outside vertical shrouds. They created a design element, a privacy element, a shading element, particularly on our southern face where that southwest sun really would want to heat our building up. And it provided, oh, by the way, a balcony as an amenity. Because as we learned during COVID, people like to get outside. And so it was nice to be able to do that and trade off the expense and complexity of a large central system for some of these benefits by putting in a more affordable, simple system. Here you can see, right, where we modeled what that shroud would look like in components. And here you see it starting to come together. We went to the the railing manufacturers, and we said, can't you just build us the frame and integrate that? And so it is the actual balcony railing company who designed our shroud with us. We went with a fascia mounted balcony rail, so we got a little bit more space on the balcony. And here you see two condensers. So we actually could save a little bit on balconies even and come up with a balanced balcony approach by putting two condensers on one balcony. And so we end up with a ducted, not the ductless, but a ducted mini split system. where two condensers are on one balcony, serving two adjacent homes, as you see here. Okay, dehumidification, where there are two different strategies being implemented. One is post NERV, that's our neighborhood ERV. So we're conditioning and dehumidifying the air that's coming, the 24-hour constant ventilation, constant filtered ventilation that's occurring within these buildings. We are conditioning and dehumidifying that, but some homes we know will still produce more humidity than others. And in the event that we notice, but through monitoring, we've specified thermostats which contain humidistats. If we see a risk of condensation, we have pre-plumbed and pre-wired an area where we can snake the condensate drain out from a spot dehumidifier, and we can dehumidify on an individual home basis without needing to invest in that infrastructure across the whole building when it's really not needed. On the plumbing side, based on some research also shared by Sean, who's, as you know, bringing us together and has a wealth of resources. If it's water you're going to put in your body and drink, it comes through copper. So that went from the riser. Here you see the large copper riser coming in, and that goes to the kitchen sinks, the ice makers. But we didn't. But we didn't invest in copper, for example, to flush the toilet or things like that. We minimize the hot water runs because we know there's pump energy associated with distributing hot water. So we went with a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 hot water system using, again, all electric buildings, heat pump water heaters. We've located those heat pump water heaters on the hallways so that we can access them. We duct the intake on the hot water heater, and we undercut the door to allow the exhaust. So we pull the warm, if you will, moist air off the high side of the hallways, and then we distribute it out along the hallway bottoms. So here you see we either use a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2. If the building is the all utilities included in the second building, we could share the hot water heater. We would use an 80-gallon hot water heater to serve not more than two homes. Or in the Lumina, it's a 1-to-1 with generally a 65-gallon heat pump water heater. And here you can see some of them installed. I'll point out controls. We have again, we don't like complex systems. Our approach is to keep it simple. During my development time, I've seen a lot of challenges associated with complex BMS systems, getting them programmed, finding folks who can successfully work on them. And we have a lot of systems in here, but we didn't want to try to coordinate all of them. Most of them have their own controls and are web-based. So our approach is simple. Control yourself well. That is what we're trying to do. So we literally envision installing something like you see here in the maintenance shop, where we're going to have 6 or 7 monitors. Everybody's control system will be resident. It's also available online, so you can do this from any device. But in the maintenance shop, you will have a control center where you're looking at each system individually and asking them to control themselves well. That's this approach. Appliances, we are using best in class. My advice here is all Energy Star appliances are not created the same, right? So from a top performing Energy Star to the lowest performing Energy Stars, 25% difference. And so we paid attention when we were picking our appliances. Again, all electric, induction stoves, heat pump dryers. And again, through the selection and all electrification, I'll point out that air tightness is such a major element of passive house. And if you were building with gas infrastructure, in addition to all the hazards of providing gas and the health issues of gas, you also have to penetrate the wall to exhaust the combusted gas. You might exhaust the combusted gas for heating water for those who are heating with you might have sometimes dryers would penetrate the walls. Your furnace would penetrate the walls. So even with those 3 things, we've eliminated 3 penetrations per home times 463 homes. And so one of the things that makes the building so tight is that we don't punch a bunch of holes in it. And so using all electric appliances allows us to do that as well. Here you can see just another little trick we did with the sink. If that's a kitchen sink, but if you look closely behind at the back of the sink, you will notice a drain. So we're using an overflow on our kitchen sink, right? So that if folks leave something in the sink, we don't end up with the damage that we heard reported from our partners, particularly for some of the senior buildings. Folks were leaving things in over the drain and having issues. Uh, Finishing up here, we want to achieve zero net energy, as I mentioned, on a 155 home 12-story building. You don't see a lot of those. So we wanted to make sure we had a pretty good handle on what our energy consumption would be. We worked actually with this great company called Redwood in California. Again, we're in Maryland, but we engaged with Redwood to help us model using various softwares what we could anticipate the energy consumption to be, because all those models don't have the same outputs. Then members of our team worked with the Redwood team to try to come up with a composite target, and that worked and fed into